Hello and welcome back once again to the Single Malt Review in our continuing foray through the spirits of Australia, our project for this year. And it's another one conspicuously well presented from Archie Rose. What have we got this time?
Well, Sydney's Archie Rose very kindly sent us some whiskies to try, including rye. Now, rye whiskey is very classic style, internationally a big part of the American distilling scene since way back. What we have here is a slightly different twist on a time-honoured classic.
Yes, indeed. This is different in a couple of ways. This is actually a rye blend. There is barley in here as well as rye. And in what proportion? I'm not 100% sure. Rye is certainly the dominant note, but
in this case, the key difference, it's malted rye, which isn't always the case, right?
It is almost never the case, because as anyone who brewer, distiller, farmer, maltster, anyone will tell you, rye is an absolute bastard of a grain and it doesn't want to do anything. And malting is one of those things that it does not want to do. It's very, very difficult to get rye to malt like you would barley, so it's normally thrown in raw, and the task of providing the amylase enzyme and converting it to sugar is left to the little bit of barley in the mix. But it can be malted. It can be malted. Almost anything, any grain can be malted with enough love and effort. And they have gone to said effort on this one to provide us with malted rye, which produces a much more mellow, more complex, less fiery, because rye is pretty, there's a real chemical savage edge to a lot of rye, especially young rye, that we've actually been pretty privileged in our contact with, because we have been able to look at Canadian examples of rye whiskey, which is where the best rye whiskey in the world comes from. It is really, Canada is the home of rye whiskey in a very, very big way. So to see it made way, way down here in the southern hemisphere, a few, scant hundreds of kilometres away from where we are in Sydney, it's very, very special. It just does not typically get made down here. And as we're going to discover, it's been made pretty shockingly well. So without spoiling it any further, we should do it. It's due diligence here. This is 46%, as is their malt whiskey. It's just about as dark as you want a whiskey to be without frightening the children.
And that colour is coming from virgin oak casks.
Yeah, virgin oak charred American casks. So this has been made in a very, very American,
not even
North
bourbon
American,
barrels,
I should say,
what I can tell, just straight up fresh.
So we'll be seeing a very, very rapid maturation on here, and it lets you know. So on the nose here, and we'll be looking for that incredibly spicy medicinal flavour that you get from rye.
Yeah, there's a lot of quite sweet bourbon notes up front, but it is obviously you get rye and bourbon anyway. But easing into that, that medicinal, that sazerac, that rye aroma. It's going to be weird compared to itself with the smells of
it's a high-speed collision between Irish moss and maple syrup.
Yeah.
Is the way I describe rye whiskey, at least on the nose. And it's normally accompanied, or at least in our case, it's normally accompanied by a huge quantity of burn and prickle, because it does provide such a raw, elemental experience. But this one is, you can get all the way in here and really nothing bad happens. It really is pretty mellow.
Cool, almost menthol-y smoothness to it, like if it's been iced or something, which manifestly hasn't.
Yeah.
We're recording this at the height of summer, there is a cyclone going on, it is hot and it is damp. This smells icy smooth.
Yeah. And I think that's coming from two different vectors there. One will be the fact that this is a rye malt blend. There'll be some malt in here sort of calming down, holding back that rye a little bit from going full medicinal weirdo on us. And the fact that the rye is malted will be having a huge effect. That will have taken a lot of that chemical edge off some of the more jagged flavours and aromas that you get from raw rye, because it's converting elements inside the grain, which I cannot speak to in any sort of authority. But as the process takes hold, then the grain is slowly converted from the unfermentable starch and the other things going on, and you get those nice sugary compounds out once it then goes into the hot liquor tank and comes through into the warty beverage that's then fermented and sent through to be distilled
That has a
on
taste.
the other end. Pretty goddamn good is how it tastes.
Yeah.
That is, it's such a good balance between more flavour and, no, I'm not sure that analogy is going anywhere. There is heaps to taste, but there is heaps of it.
Yeah.
That's a better way of describing
I was
it.
expecting a kind of like the essence of a quintessentially excellent rye whiskey, but we've got that. We've got a very good whiskey, but it is different too. It goes off in radical new directions, I think, because of the malted rye and the use of virgin oak. And so it's got just spikes of flavour in peculiar directions, whereas the, like you described, the Irish moss and maple syrup, those are both happening here. They're coming through strongly. There's a good, quite a brisk woodiness from the virgin oak. It has just flavour peaks, which are unlike what you'd normally get out of a rye whiskey, but still has a lot of strong rye character too.
It takes the extremely sort of spiky flavour profile that you normally get from rye. It's somehow smoothed off into this incredibly round middle palate flavour, which is just, the concentration is astonishing. There is the vanilla and maple syrup we're getting through from that virgin American oak is just astonishing, and what would come through if this was a more traditional North American example, that incredible fire, which some people come to it. Some people come to the high strength North American rye exactly for that thing. That sort of ignite your taste buds elemental force. That's really not there on this one. It's gentle and it flows at a much slower speed, and it really comes through on the finish. The finish just blossoms into, we've got caramel and a little bit of really sort of sweet mocha latte.
Now, if someone handed me this and said, here, here's a rye old-fashioned, I would take that and I'd sip it and I'd believe it.
Yeah. This is almost, because I've actually run the experiment, this is almost too characterful for a Manhattan. The typical rye vehicle. There's almost too much going on. It bulldozes the red vermouth, and bulldozes the Angostura bitters. There's too much of this present.
It can't be constrained.
It really doesn't. It just comes busting out of there like the Hulk. It cannot be contained in a cocktail. It just dominates the whole thing.
Adding a smidge of water has perhaps smoothed and mellowed it even more. It's neither an improvement nor a detraction. It's just very slightly different.
Yeah, I think I'm talking around this. You could feel it coming. You could feel it brewing. But I'll stop myself at the very, very last here. Was this a 100% rye? This would be the best rye whiskey I've ever tasted. It is astonishingly good. The fact that it's a blend means it can't quite claim that. Can't quite claim that prize. But I will say, as a rye experience, this is so far up there. It's astonishing. This is a 94-point whiskey for me. This just has so much, and it has so much of what it's got. The concentration, the breadth, the flavour here, the depth, it is stunningly good. What do we think?
Well, I'm of a very similar mind. We have something here which takes a tried and true formula, rye whiskey, in this case with some malted barley as well, but it takes it and adds a new twist and goes in some radical new directions to really challenge what it means to be rye whiskey. And what it means in this case, you've got a superbly drinkable, uniquely flavourful, with unique flavours as well, bottle of just sheer excellence. And it is a 90-point whiskey for me.
Yeah, stunning stuff. Maybe it's not so strange that a completely variant whiskey distilling region would really shine in its more variant styles. As much as we adored the extremely individual character of the single malt whiskey, this is as a rye whiskey, this is world class. It's not just world class; it's world beating. It is, and it has conspicuously won the world's best rye whiskey, and I think with extremely good reasons. It is astonishingly good stuff, and makes me very, very excited to see what other alternative grains we're going to see coming out of other Australian distillers, because there is a lot on the list. I don't even know who I'm going to go hunting for next, but it may well be Lark. We'll have to see what they have to say. But you really can't get away from Australian distilling without getting close to Lark, so we'll see what they have to say for themselves. Anyway,
that's 2 for 2 on truly superb whiskies out of Archie Rose.
Just tremendous stuff from Archie Rose, and cheers again to them for sending us these bottles down. Again, we would not be able to do this without a wee bit of help from the distillers now and then. But anyway, I hope that was informative for everybody up there, largely in the northern hemisphere, because I know that's where largely our viewership comes from. But just a wee glimpse into what we're up to down here. We're catching up. We are catching up. So, Slanja, we will have something else focused from the southern hemisphere, or possibly even Australia, for you very, very soon.